Imagine this, the final whistle blows in 2026 and Cristiano Ronaldo isn't celebrating. He's standing still, almost frozen. Because after everything, after 2 decades, after every record, every trophy, every moment, it all comes down to this. Because there's one thing missing. One moment that would change everything. The World Cup. Now he's 40, not 25, not 30, 40. An age where most players are watching from the stands, telling stories about what used to be. But Ronaldo? He's still chasing something he's never had. And that's what makes this different. This isn't just another tournament. This is the last chance. Because his World Cup story has never been perfect. So close in 2006, gone too soon in 2010, broken in 2014, a glimpse of magic in 2018, then gone again. And in 2022, for the first time, he wasn't the center anymore. He walked off not as the hero, but as a question. And that's the thing about Ronaldo. Doubt doesn't stop him. It feeds him. Every failure becomes fuel. Every criticism becomes pressure he turns into power. Most players accept time. He fights it. But here's what makes 2026 different. This isn't the Portugal he carried alone. This team, they don't need saving. They're ready. In midfield, Vitinha controls the tempo. Calm, precise, always thinking 2 steps ahead. Beside him, João Neves brings intensity, energy that never drops. And ahead, Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva create chaos and control it at the same time. On the wings, Rafael Leão, pure speed, pure danger. And behind them, Nuno Mendes, relentless, tireless, everywhere. This isn't a one-man team anymore. This is a system. And that's where the question begins. Because for the first time in his career, Portugal might not need Ronaldo. They can press without him, move faster without him, play freer without him. So what happens when the legend no longer fits perfectly into the system? Because Ronaldo has changed. He's not the winger who ran past defenders anymore. He's something else now, a finisher, present, a moment waiting to happen. He doesn't need 10 chances, he needs 1. And when it comes, he doesn't miss. So now, Portugal face a decision they've never had to make before. Do they build around the future or trust the past one last time? Because the answer isn't just on the pitch. It's with Roberto Martinez, a manager who believes in control, in balance, in trust. He knows what Ronaldo brings, but he also sees what this new generation can become. And in a tournament like the World Cup, you don't get second chances. So everything is set. A legend chasing history. A team ready to win without him. A system that might not need him, but moments that still belong to him. And a World Cup that could decide everything. Because if this works, if everything aligns, this won't just be a victory. It will be the greatest ending football has ever seen. But that brings us back to the question, what if Cristiano Ronaldo wins the 2026 World Cup? The truth is, no one knows how a World Cup unfolds. Not the fans, not the players, not even the greatest teams. Because football doesn't follow scripts. And that's exactly why this conversation exists. Because if everything was predictable, we would have never seen Lionel Messi lift the trophy in 2022. So now, we ask the same question again. What if it happens for Cristiano Ronaldo? Because when you strip away the emotion, Portugal have something very few teams have: balance. They can control a game or survive it. They can dominate possession or defend for their lives. And in tournaments like the World Cup, that flexibility is everything. Under Roberto Martinez, they've become unpredictable, and unpredictable teams are the hardest to stop. But this story doesn't exist without him, because even now, at this stage of his career, Ronaldo still changes game, not with pace, not with dribbles, but with moments, one chance, one movement, one finish, and sometimes that's all it takes. But let's be honest, this isn't the same Ronaldo. He can't press for 90 minutes. He won't dominate every game. There will be matches where he disappears. There will be moments where the team carries him, and that's okay, because this time, he doesn't have to do it alone. That's what makes this Portugal team different. They don't rely on him, but they still need him. The system works without him, but the moment, they still belong to him. And in football, titles are decided by moment. And then there are the margins, the things people don't think about until they decide everything. Set pieces, game management, mentality, and penalties. Because sooner or later, every team faces that moment. And Portugal, they're ready for it. With players like Bruno Fernandes and Bernardo Silva, who don't panic under pressure, and Diogo Costa, who can turn a shootout into an advantage. Those small details win tournaments. So in the end, it's not about predicting results. It's about understanding possibilities. Because for Portugal to win, Everything doesn't have to be perfect. It just has to come together at the right time. One run, one moment, one spark, and suddenly history changes. So imagine it. Not a guaranteed ending, not a scripted victory, just a possibility. A 41-year-old Ronaldo standing on the biggest stage with one final chance to complete the one story that has always been unfinished. Because if it happens, it won't just be a trophy, it will be something bigger. While Pelé had his crowns and Diego Maradona had his moment and Lionel Messi had his ending, Ronaldo's story would become something else. A story about time, about refusing to fade, about chasing something long after everyone else would have stopped. Because at the start, we asked one question: what if Cristiano Ronaldo wins the World Cup? Not when, not how, just what if? So tell me, do you think it's possible? Or is this the one story that never gets its ending? Subscribe, because in football, the impossible doesn't stay impossible for long.